Joining us on the set now is Christopher Stout, a Democratic candidate for the U.S. Senate seat, currently occupied by Senator Bob Bennett. Welcome.
Thanks. It's good to be here.
Well, let's get started. There are a lot of different issues in the United States today. A lot of people believe that one of the major problems facing the United States is the corruption in Washington, what they perceive to be the corruption in Washington. And one of those issues is the issue that goes along with that idea of corruption is this notion of earmarks, this practice of earmarks that representatives and senators engage in. What's your position on earmarks, and what would you do one way or the other if you were elected to the Senate seat?
Well, earmarks are extremely important to get jobs and programs to districts and to states. However, they've been abused over the last dozen years. We've had a spike of earmarks that are thrown into to various bills. Right now, we can't afford a lot of new programs. And so my position is that we need to restrict earmarks. Only maybe a couple per representative or senators every year. I think that's probably the best way to channel the money to where it's needed. I mean, we realize that, you know, there might be a project here in Utah that we have to get funding for. Well, we have to prioritize. You know, we're deep in debt. We have deficits that are mounting every year. We've got to be able to prioritize where those projects how they're going to be completed and which is the most important.
So you would favor the practice of using earmarks?
Oh, certainly. There's nothing wrong with that. Nothing
wrong with that. And what about this process of prioritizing? How would you decide which projects in Utah deserve the funding, which ones do not deserve the funding, which municipalities you might support in the pursuit of those funds, which ones you wouldn't?
Well, again, the seat that Senator Bennett holds belongs to the people. And what I believe for effective government is we've got to take it to the people. We've got to let the people decide what's going to be most important. So one of the platforms that I'm running on is having the ability for citizens to come to an interactive website and basically let me know how they feel about the projects that are in front of the Senate. They can express their desire that this is a good bill, this is a good project, and this is what we support. And through that way, that will help me make a decision as to how to prioritize. Now, of course, there's also going to be the option of working with other representatives and the other senator to get that done. But I think it's important that everybody gets involved in the process. So it can't just be behind closed doors in Washington. It has to be an interaction between me and the people of Utah.
So you're for earmarks, but a more transparent system.
Has to be transparent.
And one that's guided by the public opinion or the preferences of citizens back here in the state of Utah.
Correct. And there's got to be a good leaning to, like, this is what they want, because we know that we've got lots of different groups that want different things. So there has to be a consensus as to which direction that project should take.
Okay, another major issue out there in the political world as well as the economic world is the vote and subsequent passage of the Troubled Asset Relief Program, TARP, which essentially sought to secure the financial footing of the banks, investment banks on Wall Street and elsewhere. Had you been senator at the time, would you have voted for that program?
Well, I would have voted for it. TARP was extremely important. I'm an accountant, and I realized that in order for us to proceed, our financial system had to be solid, and it wasn't solid. But let me preface that, because part of the problem that we got into with the financial meltdown had to do with regulations not being tight enough. And I believe that had, for instance, Senator Bennett been aware of what was going on years prior to that, I don't think we ever should have got to the point where TARP even had to be decided that
specifically what kind of regulations weren't being overseen or weren't being enforced or maybe weren't in place even?
Well,
what happened that caused this financial crisis in your estimation?
I think,
from an accountant's perspective.
Yeah, I think specifically the fact that larger banks were able to put loans on riskier loans into their portfolios. Mortgage securitization dropped below 5%. So effectively someone could buy a loan. It was extremely risky. They didn't have to own it. They could sell it to somebody else who could sell it to somebody else who could sell it to somebody else, and that's where the issue is. And of course today we could still have another financial meltdown like we had in 2008 because of the logjam in the Senate. We haven't been able to pass any financial regulations that would prevent that from happening. And of course the other thing is too big to fail. Too big to fail has to end. I believe that if we take banks, break them up so that they have to either do commercial or lending for mortgages, those types of things, there's got to be a distinct path as to what they can do and what they can't do.
So you believe that there is such a thing as a firm that's too big to fail, where it has these consequences that go throughout the financial system?
Certainly, but we have to end that. I mean, you know,
make it impossible for a firm to get so large that...
Right, they can't get large. They have to be smaller. Kind of like what the government did with the phone company, AT&T, years ago. That got so big they had to deregulate that. They broke it up into smaller companies, and that's what I would recommend to the banking system.
Well, talking about issues that are large, let's go to healthcare reform.
Yes.
What specifically would you do with regard to healthcare reform? Would you have voted for the last Senate bill that came out?
Yes, and again, I also would have voted for the House version too. But it's more important. It's my philosophy of what has to happen. We need to get health care passed. We know that there's a problem with it. We know that there are solutions. There's differing opinions on what solutions should happen. But it has to be, we have to start tackling it. We can't wait another 15 years like we did in 1994. So in my estimation, any progress on health care is in the right direction. Now, again, it goes back to how the log jam in the Senate has happened, and that is what's really preventing health care from being passed. We figure out what the problem is, we work on a solution, and then we come up with a compromise. Once we have that compromise, then we pass legislation. Then next year, we come back, we take a look, did it solve the problem? No. Well, then we come up with better solutions, and then we come up with better compromises. And that is really how the healthcare debate and the healthcare issues are going to be resolved.
Now, there are a couple of things you've said here that are very interesting to me. One, you said you would have voted for the Senate version or the House version. The Senate version did not include a public option.
Correct.
The House version did include a public option. Where would you be on the issue of a public option?
I'm for the public option.
For the public option.
Right.
Now, you've talked about bipartisanship here. You've talked about the gridlock
right.
in the United States Senate. What specifically needs to be done to make sure that the constitutional system, as the founders established it, actually produces kind of legislation that solves pressing problems as opposed to getting bogged down in these kinds of policy debates? What kind of behavior is necessary for out of a senator?
Well, the first thing is I think we need to end the filibuster 60 vote. I think either we take it down to 51 or back up to 67. I think that that's extremely important to get problems solved.
What about party identification or voting with a particular party?
Well, again, we can't vote party affiliation. We've got to vote for the people. I'm a Democrat because I believe the party platform. We need to help people. We need to do our best to provide health care and education and all the social programs. But again, I'm also a fiscal conservative too, and we have to be able to pay for those. So the idea of voting strictly along party lines can't, I mean, that's not how the Founding Fathers set it up. The Constitution itself was a compromise. The Senate was a compromise. So we go all the way back to the Founding Fathers and we look to find how we're going to solve the problems today. And it's not going to be far right or far left. It's going to be coming to the middle and working on a compromise. And so we have to find the common ground. We have to discuss what we really need to get the problem solved, and then we have to implement it. And if it's not what I want or if it's not what you want, that's fine. We've reached a compromise. We'll see if the compromise works. If it works, great. Then everybody's happy. If it doesn't work, we have to keep coming back and not vote along party lines. It has to be what's in the best interest of the people. And health care certainly is in the best interest of the people.
Yeah, so you then would favor some reform of Senate rules that would make it easier for a majority to essentially rule the chamber.
Correct.
And that you think is kind of one of the procedural...
Yes, procedurally I think we can solve that, yes.
Right.
Yep.
Thank you very much for coming. We
All right, you're welcome.
appreciate it.
It's been a pleasure.